Hi, this is Greg. Look for my book, The Agile Brand, on Amazon or on my website at theagile.world. Welcome back to the Agile World. I'm Greg Kihlstrom. Today, I'm going to continue talking about what I refer to as the duality of the Agile brand. So last episode, I talked a bit about the things of a brand that you really do want to maintain and keep constant over time. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things in an Agile brand that you do want to look at and review and potentially change or optimize over time. Because I think it's important that we make a distinction. Traditional branding people will definitely say we don't want to change things, major things about our brand overnight. We don't want to do it willy-nilly just because a lot of time gets spent in creating everything from brand guidelines to all of the messaging, the positioning, all of that effort. And, larger companies spend millions and millions of dollars not only creating it, but rolling these things out across an entire enterprise. So you certainly don't want to, you don't want to change things that quickly that would affect an entire enterprise, global companies. But in an Agile world, we do need to be mindful that there are some things that we do want to keep an eye on and be agile enough to be able to change over time. So there's a few things that we do want to look at. We want to look at our audiences. Audiences might change over time in a few different ways. So that could be an audience ages. And so, we're looking right now, anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the last decade has seen many, many articles about millennials. Millennial marketing has been, it's kind of died down a little bit, I would say, lately, but there's been so many articles on how do we reach millennials, this new generation several years ago. And now it's shifting a little bit to Gen Z. There's many others in another camp that says, well, generational is not quite as important as life moments. And, so there's kind of a debate now of, does generational marketing even mean as much as it does? But all that to say, there are changes and preferences that people go through either within their lives or as new generations kind of grow up and come from different circumstances, whether it's growing up through an economic recession, growing up through the adoption of the internet, and everything like that. So audience is certainly one of those things that we want to take a look at and see. And, one example of this, a missed opportunity that I'll say, one example, again, to use a car brand example, as I've done a few times already, is Scion. So they don't exist anymore, but Scion was a brand by Toyota, for those of you not familiar with it. Toyota created this Scion brand to really target millennials. So they had the early research that millennials were a little less likely to buy cars, and when they did, they wanted them super customized, everything like that. So they created this brand, and they were sold mostly out of Toyota dealers alongside them, but they were super customizable. They were a little sportier. They were cheaper. Had specific options for millennials, whatever that really means, but targeted at a younger demographic. So it turns out they weren't wildly successful with millennials, but one of their cars in particular, it was the big boxy car. I don't know if you remember. I think it was called the XB. Was super popular with a much older demographic because, for what it's worth, it was really easy to get in and out of the car. So here we have this brand targeted really at millennials and doesn't really hit with the target market. All of their advertising is like super hip and young people and all of that. And yet this older audience really likes this car of theirs. And, so from my perspective, they didn't go after this audience. They kind of missed the opportunity to be a little bit nimble and say, okay, well, you know what, we started out down this path, but we actually found a market and we found an audience that is super interested in our stuff. it's just not necessarily what we intended. So, again, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. A more agile brand would have taken that, and who knows what they could have done with it. That maybe they rebrand that car as a Toyota and sell it there because they don't want to dilute the Scion brand. But regardless, it was a missed opportunity. Sure enough, recently, within the last couple of years, they ended up retiring the Scion brand altogether. Kind of rolled in some of those cars into Toyota, but really, kind of missed the mark in my opinion. So in addition to audience, strategies and the tactics used are certainly other things that can and should change. So great example is just the advent of social media, for instance. So, I've been in this business for a while. I saw the advent of really social media marketing back in, early 2000s. And, if you had a long-term brand plan back in 2002, probably didn't encompass social media and that whole channel and stuff like that. So, those are cases where long-term brand planning, there's some things, again, you want to keep your mission and your values constant, but there are things that are going to pop up, even not even necessarily brand new channels like social media, but even individual channels and platforms and AR, VR, all of these things that they exist, but they're being increasingly adopted. You need a brand that can actually adopt these things, pretty as they're adopted by consumers. So in the next few episodes, I'm going to talk about a few things that set Agile brands apart from others. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please rate the show on iTunes or contact me through my website at theagile.world. You can find my books, The Agile Brand and The Agile Web, on Amazon and on my website at theagile.world.